Video number 2. I think that other video annoyingly stopped on me. I'm not sure if it did. So I'm just going to recapitulate what I said just very quickly. So I was talking about how I threw a magnifying glass into the toilet, and I was trying to conceal it, but not very effectively. But no one saw me going out of the classroom with it. But obviously, it would have been very easy for someone to have seen me go out of the classroom with a magnifying glass behind my back. Then a girl told the teacher. The teacher got us all to asked us what what toilet we'd been into. Who'd been into the middle toilet where the magnifying glass was. I didn't put my hand up when she asked, which obviously showed I must have had a very, very basic level of theory of mind. And then I was talking about how it's a myth that no autistics ever lie. It does contain a grain of truth because autistics as a group are more honest usually than non-autistics, and also, like I was saying, I'm basically a pretty honest person and I don't like lying. And when I do sort of like don't own up to something, it's because I want to avoid punishment, but I can't do it in a very effective way, so it's always still very obvious usually that I'm the culprit. I can't deceive people in a kind of I'm not good at deception, put it that way, and also I don't really have any desire to do that either. But the times when I have I guess kind of lied in a kind of more simplex way is when I wanted to avoid punishment. So when someone says, "Who did this?" and I would say, "It wasn't me," to avoid punishment. Obviously, to do that, you do require some very basic theory of mind, but it's on a very basic level, and I clearly do have difficulties with theory of mind of a more kind of complex nature because I'm not very good at that sort of higher order perspective taking. Like as I said, I failed the Sally Ann test, for example, when I first came across it in a book, because I didn't understand that it was trying to tap into the sort of thought processes, and and obviously you need theory of mind to sort of make relationships work and things like that, and you also need theory of mind to understand a character's motivations or intentions in a story or in a film, which I've always massively struggled with because I had comprehension difficulties as a child, very pronounced comprehension difficulties, which is one of the first causes of concern, which obviously, because I struggled with theory of mind, I found it really hard to understand the character's intentions and feelings and thought processes. I could never work out when a character was lying or when they weren't telling the truth, even when it was really obvious. Like my mum would often have to pause films we were watching because I just could not work out that a character was lying. So working out when someone else is lying, I can't really do that very well, and sometimes but also that can kind of make me not trust people because I can't work out when someone's lying. I often kind of think that someone might be lying even when they're not lying, but I think that's kind of like a defensive strategy because I've been caught out on a number of times where someone hasn't been truthful to me. I then kind of like think, okay, I must kind of have my suspicious antennae up all the time and kind of think, are they lying? Because I don't know if they're lying. So to kind of like protect myself, I kind of like, it affects my trust with other people because I don't know if they're lying or not. So I kind of sometimes automatically think they might not be being 100% truthful with me, even when a person is actually telling the truth, just to kind of protect myself because I'm not sure if they're telling the truth or not. So it can affect trust with other people if you have problems with theory of mind as well, because you literally have no way of telling someone else's motives or anything like that. But yeah, it is certainly, I think, a bit of a stretch to say that autistics never lie. That's kind of like the sort of pop culture idea of autism, which is an extreme stereotype. Just because autistics as a group tend to prefer honesty, and because we're not good at deception, at least higher order deception, and because we do struggle with fear of mind, but it doesn't mean we necessarily are completely without it, it doesn't mean that we are completely incapable of lying. It just means that the way we go about it tends to be different to non-autistics. We're not very good at it, and when we do lie, it's often like really simple, kind of childlike lying. Like developmentally, we're behind, so we're not really capable of that really higher order kind of deception. And also, we're not very good at telling when someone else is lying either. And also, when other people lie, apparently they do things like avoid eye contact and stuff like that. And the problem there, of course, which can work the other way, is that autistics are sometimes accused of lying when they're actually not lying, precisely because we tend to have problems with eye contact. So that can mean, like, say, if an autistic is caught up in a criminal justice system, they can actually be in quite a vulnerable situation when someone thinks they're lying when they're not. So I think autistics lie differently, but they're also often accused of lying when they're not lying, just because we can naturally look a little bit shifty, not intentionally, but just because of our problems making eye contact and stuff like that. And also if we're like under extreme anxiety, that can also make us look a bit shifty as well. But yeah, like I said, the ability to lie, that is part of cognitive empathy, so that's part of theory of mind. That doesn't involve any feelings or anything like that. And I think cognitive empathy to an extent can be learned by autistics, at least those with sort of language skills and a higher verbal IQ. To some extent it can be learned, but we're never going to be like really good at it. Affective empathy, on the other hand, as I said, is literally sharing the other person's feeling. So it doesn't require perspective taking. You don't need to understand why another person is feeling a particular way. You don't need to understand their feelings. You don't need to see things from their point of view, which is cognitive empathy. You simply are sharing. It does require sharing, but not in a kind of perspective taking way. You're sharing the other person's emotions. So if the other person is sad and you start feeling sad at the same time as them, you're mirroring their emotions. Or if the other person is angry and you start feeling angry, you're mirroring their emotions. You're sharing their feelings. That's one step towards the other, but to completely inhabit the other, you have to have cognitive empathy, because affective empathy on its own is kind of, you're not actually understanding the other person, you're still coming at it from your own perspective. You're feeling what the other person is feeling, but from your own perspective. You haven't inhabited the other person's shoes. And some autistics do have intact affective empathy, but it's not a defining feature of autism in the same way that theory of mind is. But Simon Baum-Cohen does argue in his book that it is possible that some types of autism does also include an affective empathy deficit, even if it's not the defining feature, because it doesn't need to be present in all types of autism and it's not diagnostic. It is possible that in some types of autism there's a more kind of general empathy deficit, which affects both affective and cognitive empathy. And I think we cannot ignore that as a possibility. Obviously more research has to be done, but I do think that certainly for myself, I do struggle with the affective component of empathy. And as I've said in another video, the reason I think this is because I really struggle with feelings and emotions. And there is something called alexythymia, and I definitely feel that I do have some degree of alexythymia, in that I can identify really extreme emotions in myself and others, although I'm not very good at even that actually. I can but if it's like a really extreme emotion, I can kind of identify it. But I struggle, like for example, if I'm like really, really angry, I will know I'm angry, sort of thing. But so it's not like I can't identify emotions at all. It's not like that. A bit like with theory of mind, it's not like I completely lack it, but I do struggle with it. And yeah, with affective empathy, like if someone else is upset, I don't always resonate with them. Like I do feel an element of discomfort, so it's not like I'm feeling absolutely nothing. And I don't like it, but I'm not like really sharing exactly what they're feeling. So I do feel I have a kind of an affective deficit as well. And that's possibly connected to alexithymia, But the thing with alexithymia, although lots of people in the neurodiversity movement go on about this and say, oh, the empathy deficits and autism isn't caused by the autism, it's caused by alexithymia, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's being a bit disingenuous, actually, because although it might not be the defining feature of autism in the same way that fear of mind deficits are, alexithymia has a really high rate in autism. Like, not all autistics have alexithymia, admittedly, but a really high percentage do have at least some type of alexithymia. And, of course, alexithymia can occur in other conditions, not just autism. But actually, if you think about it, there's very few symptoms of autism that only occur in autism. Like, if you take any autistic feature, it can occur in pretty much any other condition. So, but that doesn't mean that it's not part of autism either, because a really high number of autistics have alexithymia. That suggests there's got to be some connection between autism and alexithymia. It might not be defining, but it's a bit like executive functioning, which can occur without autism. That's not defining part of autism, but such a high number of autistics have executive functioning impairments. You have to think that they are connected in some way. So I do think that actually autism can affect empathy as a whole, but obviously not in all autistics because it's not defining. But that doesn't mean it's not a part of autism for those people who do have that problem either. And I definitely do feel it is a part of my autism. But also, and I'm going to come back to this in another video, struggling with theory of mind can also affect affective empathy as well. Because if you're struggling to perspective take, it's going to be harder for you to actually really understand what the other person is feeling. So, I mean, affective empathy on its own is often like a sort of mirroring form of empathy, which people say happens instinctively and unconsciously. But the other thing is, if you're not picking up on what the other person is feeling because you're not very good, say, at, I don't know, working out their facial expressions, and I really struggle with that. If you're not actually really kind of like connecting with them because you're struggling with their facial expressions, because you're struggling with their tone of voice, because you're struggling, maybe sensory issues are getting in the way, so you're feeling distracted, maybe you're distracted by your own anxiety and other things, that can like put up a kind of shield up. So the sort of the feelings that are coming from the other person aren't quite meeting you, they're kind of meeting a barrier and being reflected back. So you're not really actually allowing their feelings to enter you. And that's my theory as well. And I think that it can be part of autism for some people. It's like an extreme self-state. After all, autism does actually mean self-state. So you're struggling to pick up the other person's feelings. Obviously, that's going to affect your affective empathy. If you can't... So actually I do think it's part of the autism. So I think I do actually struggle with both types of empathy. And I think although I don't completely lack either, the collective effect of struggling with both does kind of massively impact my ability to relate to other people. So do let me know what you think. So thank you for watching.